Jonathan, welcome. Welcome back to the United States of America. Please tell us about your recent trip to Palestine. Give us a sense of
Okay.
what you've seen and what we need to know.
Well, the first thing obviously is everybody is into Corona. Like the United States, it's almost like there's two countries, one group that takes it seriously and tries to socially distance, wear their masks, wash frequently, and hope for the best. And there's another group who just can't trust the authorities, says whatever will be, will be. We don't know enough anyway. And even those who get it, most of the time doesn't affect them. And when there are restrictions, they're always looking for ways to get around the restrictions rather than abide by them. So we have that too. We also see very clearly the political situation, how much it impacts everything. The settlers are out in force. The authorities are doing more home demolitions, more attacks on Palestinians than otherwise. The situation is different in the Palestinian Authority areas, different from East Jerusalem, different from Arab villages inside Israel itself, different in the Jewish neighborhoods and especially the religious neighborhoods. It's very highly politicized, but mostly people are thoroughly confused. They really feel uncomfortable with the uncertainty of it all, not knowing how long it will last, not knowing what to plan. So that's definitely the prevailing atmosphere. On the political situation, which I guess is what you are more interested in, I have, I think, two major observations. The first is that the sense of uh, lack of any faith or trust in the Palestinian leadership, I've never seen it as bad as now. People don't expect anything from them. People don't trust them for anything. People don't really consider them representative. People are a little bit encouraged by the fact that elections are being promised within 6 months. Some people say, let's wait and see, they'll probably never happen. But there's even talk of joint Hamas Fatah lists for the elections, not so much because they have reconciled, but because both parties are so worried about the popular mistrust of both of them that they say the only way we can win this and stay in power is if we go jointly into this election because people just want to vote us both out if they can. So that's one observation, the thorough lack of trust in the political leadership. A second observation is a real feeling of helplessness, hopelessness. They're disgusted, obviously, with Trump, but they're equally disgusted with Biden. They're not sure that anything is going to improve at all, no matter who comes in. They obviously are very upset with the Arab world, from the Bahrainis to the UAE to now Sudan. But people are just shrugging it off. This is not going to change us. We're upset, but not really surprised. One thing that's amazing is, despite this general malaise, this general feeling of helplessness, there is tremendous power and potential and determination. There's just no leader There's no program, there's no party, there's no vision, but there's this fierce determination that I know, I just feel it. I know that they will surprise the whole world at some point, not necessarily with a violent revolution. People are really pretty much convinced that that's not gonna really get them anywhere. Yeah, but that they are ready to sacrifice, they are ready to move. They just need somebody, something, some vision to pull them together. There were a couple of points of light, I would say, two or three that really surprised me. One of them was meeting this Palestinian billionaire, Munib al-Masri, who suddenly decided to launch not just one case against Great Britain for the Balfour Declaration, which I could talk about now, but also to start using courts, both national courts and international courts, in the service of the Palestinian cause, which is really amazing because Palestinians have so much justice on their side, morality, justice, and law, that they've never really used the courts. They've used the UN system, the resolutions. They've used some publicity, some attempts to use PR, but they really haven't gone into courts. In fact, it's the other side who's been dragging Palestinians into courts for terrorism and anti-Semitism and God knows what. Even the settlers are suing the Airbnb because they're not allowing them to advertise the stolen property to be rented. That's a very interesting case, because one group of Palestinians, the daughter of Charles Shammas, if you know him, with the ACLU, went into that case as an intervener. They managed to find out the actual owners of the property that Airbnb was renting by laying one map on top of another. And so they went into the case and say, oh, you know what? Now we know who has our property. And now that they walked into court, we want to countersue. And it would have been a wonderful case, except that Airbnb folded, and the case was dismissed because Airbnb gave the settlers everything they wanted. But the idea of using national courts, for example, in Canada, there is a law prohibiting the recruiting of Canadians for any foreign army. And the Israeli army always recruits in Canada and even advertises that the recruiters from the IDF are here at the embassy and you can come in and talk to them. So some people are deciding to bring in action in Canada under Canadian law against those who are recruiting in Canada for the Israeli army. The possibility of bringing any number of cases in the United States against settlers, against Zionist organizations that use their 501c3 status to carry out clearly political activities, for Jewish National Fund and everything that it's doing. The possibility of bringing cases in national courts as well as international courts has really not been used as an avenue of recourse by Palestinians. So that we may see a lot more of that now. So this is one area of light, of hope. Another is, and I realize my time is short, but I just want to mention it. Sabil has decided to launch a number of initiatives locally to help the Palestinian Christian community in ways other than just political advocacy, to try and establish some kind of health care system, insurance for people in the West Bank, which they really don't have now, as well as housing, as well as other projects that require minimal funding, but that require a lot of grassroots organizing and support in addressing the actual needs of the Palestinian community. I had an evening meal with Omar from El Sabil, and I was amazed at his, new ideas, new thinking, willingness to continue to live even under extremely depressing circumstances. So, in short, and I see my time is up and I can answer a few questions, the situation is very bad, very depressing, but really pregnant and full of potential and hope.
Are there questions for Jonathan? I have additional question. You weren't able to get into Israel very much, if at all. What can you talk about this protest movement against Netanyahu?
Yes, it's real. It's deep. I think it'll continue until he falls. I think he will fall. He's sort of like living in a Trump-like world where he's running forward and trying to create one crisis after the other and saying, "You need me, I'm your only hope." But sooner or later, it's catching up with him. The protests against him, unfortunately, there are some flashes of its willingness to hook up with the issue of Palestine and occupation. But by and large, it's a privileged Tel Aviv group. They are almost more they are definitely anti-corruption. They are anti the religious and their craziness. They are sort of sympathetic to the Palestinians, but they're not making that a central point in their protests. Although you see it occasionally, you see some shadows of it occasionally. I think the protest movement wants to get rid of Netanyahu, and I think they will probably end up succeeding.
Kelly, you have a question?
Yeah, so I know you just wrapped up writing this book, Beyond the Two-State Solution. So could you go into a little bit why now and what you were hoping to get from writing this book?
Okay. Basically, I've been a supporter of the two-state solution for a long, long time. Even before that became the established position of the Palestinian, the majority of Palestinians. But the biggest problem with the two-state solution is that both it was a pragmatic, not an ideological solution. It doesn't really challenge either Zionism or Palestinian nationalism in any radical way. It just says you just exercise it in 78% of Palestine, and you exercise your rights in 22% of Palestine, and we won't look into the underlying racism or ethnic superiority or injustice involved. We'll just take 67 as an arbitrary line and do it that way. The problem with it is that when you start settling all over the West Bank, and you now have about 700,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank, it's no longer possible to reverse that. You're not going to uproot these communities. And they have become an integral part of Israeli society, structures, economy, political life. The few attempts that were made to displace settlers, either from Gaza or from Hebron or Ammona, just were so traumatic to the Israeli political structure that they made it clear they're not going to do them again. Well, if you can't get rid of the settlers, then you really can't have a two-state solution. You can't have a Palestinian state. if you don't have a Palestinian state, why are you still talking two-state solution? If that doesn't work, or if that becomes impossible to implement, if you can no longer create a genuine Palestinian state that's at all a meaningful state, then what do you have? What are you left with? What is the new goal, the new vision? Is it one state? And what's wrong with one state? And how can you implement a one state solution that addresses the real need of Israeli Jews as well as Palestinian Arabs? And is it possible? Maybe it is possible to arrive at a solution that addresses the needs of both parties without being exclusionary, without saying the other don't exist, without negating or delegitimizing the other. So I present such a vision that addresses the needs of Israeli, Jewish, Zionist, and Palestinian Arab nationalists without negating the other. It takes some creative thinking and creative structuring, and does not require you to uproot 700,000 settlers, but it does require a rethinking of what Zionism is and of what Palestinian nationalism is, in a way that is no longer exclusive. So you can't have a Jewish state just for the Jews if half of the population is not Jewish. And you can't have a Palestine Arabiya, an Arab Palestine, if half of your citizens are not Arab. So you must have a state that addresses both sides. And I try to play around with what that would look like, what are the obstacles, and what are the possibilities for creating such a new vision. I don't pretend that this is the solution, but I would like to start a conversation. Now, because most people say, no, only two states. Well, what do you do if that's no longer possible? And other people say, yes, one state. And that means when we become 51%, we can do to them what they are doing to us, namely negate and suppress them. Now, that doesn't work either. You have to have a solution that addresses both parties, and it is possible to have such a solution. And this is what I'm exploring.